stop the diet talk, really focus on nutrition by addition and moving to be stronger. We're not moving to punish or moving to earn our food.
Hey guys, it's Cori from Redefining Strength. Welcome to the Fitness Hacks Podcast. If you are listening, remember there is the new video format you can find on YouTube at the Fitness Hacks Podcast. But what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about why now is the right time to get started. Because March is National Nutrition Month, Michelle and I are going to go over some great tips to help you really improve your relationship with food and help future generations have a better relationship with food. I'm going to debunk 3 meal timing myths. I'm going to talk about why the good all week sort of mentality or mindset or even pattern can be sabotaging us. And then I'm going to share a great way to actually include more unilateral work, even if you can't do those full single leg moves. So let's jump right in. Now's not the right time to get started. Many of us have said this when we're faced with making a change, but we have to realize that now is never the right time to get started. And also, often we only try and start things when it is the perfect time. And this is probably why nothing has actually led to lasting changes. When we're approaching a new program and we're thinking, hey, I want to lose weight, I want to gain muscle, we maybe find that thing we're gonna do. And then something comes up in life where we have, extra expenses, we have extra stressful times at work, family life starts to get in the way, maybe it's the holidays or the summer with vacation, whatever else it is, like if you really look at it, there's almost always a reason why it's not the perfect time in life. But we also then see those things pop up and so we say, well, I'll start this tomorrow. Okay, but in the process of starting it tomorrow, starting it next month, starting it next year, what are you gonna do in that meantime? Often we end up going backwards. If we're not moving forwards, we're going backwards. So even though you might only lose an inch, if you could have gained a centimeter, you'd be that centimeter ahead. And while it seems like a very small measurement, you have to remember that inch you could have lost if you didn't start right now. So if you're thinking like now is not the right time to get started, think about what you've always done, the pattern you've always repeated. You've searched for that 21-day fix, that 30-day challenge, that perfect time period where you can go all in on a program, right? And I do get the desire to get the most out of whatever we're doing. We don't want to buy something and feel like we're not getting to really use it, right? So if you get that gym membership, you get that challenge, you get that program, you want to be able to implement every single thing. However, we have to remember that we can implement it over time. When we often go for these 21-day challenges, these 30-day fixes, we're working out 2 times a day, right? We're doing all these crazy things with restriction with our diet. And we have that time period where maybe it allows for that even. Or we fall off because we don't end up having a time that actually allows for it. And that's why we never see results build. But even if we do make it through those 21 days, at the end, we don't have sustainable habits. And then we constantly think we don't have the willpower, the self-control to keep moving forward. But it's because we've searched for this perfect time to get started and then created habits only based on that. When most of life is not the perfect time to move forward. Most of life is busy at work, family life getting in the way, vacations over the summer, holidays, and being with family and not being able to eat exactly what you planned or work out on the exact schedule you wanted. Most of life is not the perfect time. And we've got to be able to handle those times if we actually want to move forward. We have to remember if we're not moving forward, we're potentially setting ourselves back. And forward can mean maintaining the previous results we've built. Too often during the holidays, we don't simply just do that, right? We lose some of the progress we've made by actually gaining weight over just even maintaining the weight loss we've already achieved. So staying still is not necessarily a bad thing. That can be forward progress because it builds that foundation to move forward when we actually have a more perfect time. But you have to think about what you can do right now to do the minimum to move forward. How can you make a 1% improvement on how you would have handled this time in the past in the future? I've had clients come in and say, hey, I was going to have this busy time at work and I'm so glad I started, even though my inclination was to say, oh no, I'll start after. They said they were so excited that they started because they learned how to handle that and they didn't revert back to old coping mechanisms, which would have led to weight gain and more stress and lack of sleep and them falling off their program to feel like they're behind when they're going to start later afterwards, right? So those times that feel imperfect are the perfect times to learn to do the minimum. And that's actually what leads to consistency and us allowing those results to build. If instead of focusing on making more out of the perfect times, we focused on making a little bit better of the not so ideal times, we'd actually see those improvements over the year. Plus, we'll give ourselves that better foundation off of which to really build when we do have the opportunity to do a Kickstarter challenge, right? If you think about it, if you can maintain your weight loss through the holidays, going into January, you're that much more ahead. Sure, you might not have lost like you'd ideally like to have, but you didn't set yourself back and have that hole that you had to dig yourself out of. So just remember, it's never the right time to get started. So ultimately, you can choose to start today or you can wait. But if you choose to start today, you're moving yourself forward, even if it's very small movements, so that you can build upon that foundation. And trust me, you're gonna appreciate the consistency that you did build, the way you learned to handle the minimum, because that's really what builds results. Learning how to handle those not so ideal times. I'm so excited to talk to Michelle today about healing our relationship with food and even helping future generations. Because I think so often, we get dragged down and don't see the results we want because of how we think about and assign moral values to foods, how we think about our bodies. So I'm super excited to dive into this subject and give you some helpful tips. All right, so I'm super excited to chat with Michelle today because going into March, it's National Nutrition Month, and the subject is fueling for the future. So we're gonna talk about healing our food relationships and even helping future generations have a better relationship with food. So Michelle, let's talk about why our relationship with food is so important to actually address and how we can go about changing how we think about foods.
Yeah, so really a big thing is how you talk about food, how you are thinking about food really does dictate kind of the stress around food. And oftentimes that's kind of underplayed with how stressing about our food actually plays into your overall health. But just stressing alone, we know increases cortisol, which can increase fat and have us making it so it's harder to actually lose weight when we want to. So we really want to make sure that we're coming at it with a positive attitude and really making sure, going back to what we had talked about previously in one of our podcasts, that there's really no good, there's really no bad. Food is just food. There's different types of portion sizes that are really going to affect kind of our views and what we want for our goals.
And we're all guilty of it, right? We use language with foods. We say we're bad for eating this. We talk negatively about our body. Like, there are things that are going to happen, and we're not born thinking this. It's something we've built, so that it's going to take time to really address our relationship and change it. And what are some tips to help us sort of get started doing that?
So the big thing is really just stop the diet talk. And I know that really is easier said than done because, as you mentioned, we're all guilty of it. We all, say, "Oh, it's my cheat day. Oh, I shouldn't have this. That's going to go straight to my hips, thighs." We've all heard those terms. But we really want to make sure that that is not the message that we are sending out, and because it's really going to be planting seeds of discontent regarding body image and food in those around us and ourselves. Really making sure that we are using proper language around food, because choice of words do matter and change not only our perspective, but those around us. So some things that we really want to avoid is using those terms from the get-go. So stop using good, stop using bad, but actually talk about what it is you're actually trying to do to fuel your body. So instead of like, "Oh, that is bad, I shouldn't have that," pair it with, "Oh, I'm going to maybe have a some of that, but I'm going to pair it with protein or pair it with some vegetables with fiber, because I know just eating that alone is not going to keep me full or satiated for later."
I think it's also so important that we realize like the emotions attached to words too. Cause like I know I grew up in the industry calling the day where you didn't necessarily track a cheat day, right? And so for me, it also has no emotional impact. But I do like to clarify what this means because I don't want someone to take it that way. And I even try and adjust my language when I'm talking about a treat and not say a treat, right? Like there's certain things that we're conditioned to do, but not only trying to remove those words, but even assess the mindsets behind them is so key. And little changes can add up. Like even if you say like, "Hey, I have this weight to lose," or whatever else, "I'm not at my goal yet," like adding that "yet" on can be key. And realizing that it's okay to admit you're not where you want to be and that you want to improve and you always want to improve, but realizing it has to be separated from feeling negatively about your body or your lifestyle now.
Yeah, I think that is a big part, is because like a lot of times I think there's this misconception that you can't be trying to improve and trying to change without being negative about it and without perpetuating this kind of binge restrict cycle, this body shaming that comes along with it. But that's not actually the case. And we really do need to separate that and kind of take ownership of that. So when people say you can't have one without the other, you definitely can. So the way that we really want to do it is exactly as changing the perspective, using the language that's appropriate. Like you said, adding that yet is such a small step, but it is so powerful when it comes to your mindset. If you are constantly looking at eating healthy as a form of restriction, and you're restricting those foods that are ultra processed, restricting, saying, I can't have this according to my new diet, that is where the relationship of in your with your food is really going to suffer, and it's going to impact those around you too. So we really want to talk, when I'm talking about kind of healing the future generations, it really starts with you, how you talk to yourself and how you talk about your food, but it's also going to change those around you, because if you're going to uh, appropriately talk about diet and health around your kids, around family, around friends, you are also planting those seeds in them to be able to be like, oh, this is the mindset that we actually need to have when you are moving forward.
And we hear this come up a lot when we are talking about tracking macros, right? We have, parents that are worried, hey, if my child sees me logging, measuring, weighing everything, what are they going to think? And I think even changing this perception of this education is so key, because tracking macros isn't about restriction. It's about learning what your body actually needs. We teach our kids how to budget, right? We have all these other things because they need to know how to manage other aspects of their life. Why wouldn't diet be the same? And when you start to break it down in that way, you realize it's your own mindset surrounding it. It's your own feelings of restriction. And then it's that lacking in education maybe that's sort of going into teaching them how important this is in their nutrition.
Absolutely. So for me, it's really one of the things that I struggle with is people tend to dumb down nutrition for kids. So one of the big things is really they'll be like, oh, um, when I'm asking my mom why she's doing that, and the response is, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, and they stop it there. But most of us, yes, like weight is an outcome of it, and oftentimes it can be the focus. But if you get down to the nitty gritty, that's not the real reason why you're actually trying to eat healthier. And if you don't have your why, I would really challenge people to reflect on that, get that answer, and respond and tell them the truth about it. Don't just say, I'm doing this to lose weight. Tell them your truth. I'm doing this because I want to be able to keep up with you. I'm doing this so my knees don't hurt when I'm trying to get down on the ground to play with you. I'm doing this so we can go on adventures together and I'm not slowing you down. So it's really taking that into perspective too. And again, coming back to, don't dumb down nutrition. When you're doing those measuring things, you don't need to say, oh, I'm doing this because I want to eat low calories, or I'm too fat and I need to lose weight. You need to say, I'm doing this because I need to make sure that I'm giving my body the proper nutrients so that I can get stronger, so that I can make sure I'm improving my energy. And or even saying, I know we're going on an adventure and I'm not going to be able to eat for a while, so I want to make sure I'm fueling up on protein and fiber so I won't get hungry later. That's the type of conversation that we do want to have with kids. And kids ask. Like, kids will ask those questions, like, why are you eating this? What does this food have? That is one conversation that I think we as adults need to have more with children, is actually providing that education for the kids so that they're ahead when they get older. They know that we're eating veggies because we're trying to get the fiber, we're trying to get micronutrients and energy. They know we're focusing on protein because we are trying to gain muscle and get stronger and stay full.
We almost don't realize that we're giving them control by actually talking about these things proactively. So often the reason the dieting culture is built up is because we're reactive to it, right? Now we have to lose weight, so to speak, right? We have to make a change because we feel negatively about something. Versus when we educate our kids when they're growing up, when they're really active, when they're doing all these things, and it's not in that sort of negative pre-frame, we can educate them to be like, hey, you're learning about macros because you need to fuel your sports, you need to fuel your activity, you want to grow big and strong, you want to be powerful, you want to be able to take any challenges and live to a healthy old age being functionally strong. We almost want to empower their own agency by educating them before it's associated with a negative thing. Because tracking being restrictive, having to cut our portions, all these things are seen as negative because of how and when we've often done them, not the acts themselves.
Yes, and I love that because it really is, it's all about educating while they're young and getting ahead of the game, because so oftentimes with everything in health, we aren't doing preventative care. This is the preventative care. And if you are someone that has had these body image issues, or if you're someone that avoids certain situations because of how you're worried that you're going to be perceived by others, it's probably because the environment you grew up in put an emphasis on those areas. And we want to kind of stop that with ourselves first. And so we're also helping those around us.
So, to sum it up, with helping future generations have a better relationship with food, what are three big takeaways that parents should have in terms of how they talk to themselves and how they talk to their kids?
So the first one is going to be stop the diet talk, really focus on nutrition by addition and moving to be stronger. We're not moving to punish or moving to earn our food, and being honest and telling others your truth. I think those are the main points, really making sure that you are telling the people your reasons why you're doing this.
I love that. I think it's key. We recognize that it's always going to be a journey and it's okay to always want to improve, but that doesn't have to mean that we're negative or unhappy now. It's just that life is meant to be a journey where we can see how much we can accomplish. Let's talk about meal timing and meal timing myths. So meal timing has become a more popular subject because of the rise of intermittent fasting and the popularity of it, but it's one of these things that we can really adjust based on our needs and our goals. It's also those 1% changes that really can make a difference, but won't make a difference if we don't have the foundation built first. So before you even worry about meal timing or even give any thought to these myths and how you're going to adjust them to fit your needs and goals, focus first on those fundamentals, which means you need to know what calories you're consuming and what macro ratios you're consuming. Once you have that dialed in to help you fuel your training for your race, fuel your muscle gains, fuel your weight loss, then you can worry about meal timings. But if you don't hit your macros and calories for the day, it really doesn't matter how you time your meals. You're not going to see the results that you want. So the three most common myths that I hear are: eat X amount of meals per day, you need to eat right after training, and eating after X time a day will make you gain fat. And I say X time because there's a whole bunch of different thoughts on this, which is part of the reason why it's so confusing and why they're also myths. But ultimately, if you want to see results, as I said, you have to focus on those macros and calories. If you hit that for the day, nothing else matters. So don't overcomplicate things, simplify. Now, breaking down these myths, the eat X amount of meals per day. We've all heard, eat 6 small meals per day or eat only 1 meal per day, right? With the rise of intermittent fasting, it's become more popular to sort of shrink the eating window and extend how long we aren't eating. 16:8 is a common one. But in terms of this, is intermittent fasting right for you? Maybe. Are 6 small meals a day right for you? Maybe. When we think about how we time our meal, we want to assess our lifestyle, our needs, our goals, and then even realize that the meal timing we might have used to reach one goal might not fit us as we get older or as we work towards another goal. So in terms of everything, I know intermittent fasting is promoted to be this very magical thing that will help you lose weight, but it really does it by limiting the mindless snacking, potentially helping you get more consistent with your routine, but still it comes down to dialing in those calories and macros. Whether you do 6 small meals a day or you do, a longer fasting window and have a smaller eating window, if you don't hit your calories and macros, you are not going to see results. Always comes back to that. But I want you to assess what meal timing might be right for you. So some things you want to consider: your schedule. Are you doing a training at a time where you can break that fast right after? So if you're training in the evening, maybe fasting all day, skipping breakfast and even lunch really works for you. However, if you're training at 5 a.m., the idea of fasting till 5 p.m. is probably going to backfire, okay? So you want to think about your schedule, even how busy you are on a daily basis. Is it really hard for you to eat 6 small meals? Is that meal prep challenging? Is the timing of doing that as you're busy, going here and there really challenging? Could having that eating window help you get consistent and make meal prep easier? So you want to consider all of this, even your goals. You might have used intermittent fasting to help you lose weight because it condensed down your eating window and it really worked for your schedule. But now with focusing on gaining muscle, you're not having that fuel prior, so your training sessions aren't able to be as intense as you'd like, or you don't have those full glycogen stores to really create that anabolic environment to help you build muscle. So you want to even consider your goals. You do also want to consider your age, gender, all of those different things, because this can really impact the results that you see. Men actually have a better experience intermittent fasting, and they find that it actually works better for them than for women. However, during menopause, it can both really help some women and also really backfire. So it's not even just the stage of life, but even our individual preferences and how things work for us and the macro ratios we're using. But you want to assess these different things. So don't even be afraid to test something out for yourself. If you are a person that tends to like to skip breakfast, maybe it really works. If you're finding it's really hard to cut out the mindless snacking, maybe you set that eating window. Maybe you don't like to meal prep a lot, so you set that eating window. Or maybe you find that you are a grazer naturally, and so you want to have 6 small meals a day, or if you don't eat, then you tend to think about food more, or you get too hungry and then you overeat. But realize that whether you have 6 small meals a day or you fast and have 1 large meal, you can hit your macros and calories and see results, but you have to use the mealtime that feels right for you. Forcing one because you heard someone say that intermittent fasting is magical is not going to work out. It's not going to allow you to be consistent, okay? So that's meal timing myth number 1. Meal timing myth number 2 is you need to eat right after your training. So while this post-workout training window can be used to optimize the results that you get, if you do not eat right after your workout, you are not all of a sudden gonna lose all your muscle mass, okay? They've also shown that the benefits of this post-exercise window is like 3 hours, so you have quite a bit of time, and it's even 3 to 5 in some cases. So don't stress if you forgot your protein shake, if you can't eat a meal, if you're running around busy after your training session. However, we do also want to know what we can use to optimize our results, especially once we have our macros and calories dialed in, especially as we're all going along this journey and seeing results and we want to try and expedite them, or even as we're nearing our goal and maybe struggling with hitting that plateau because we're trying to achieve a result we haven't achieved before. And when it comes to this, yes, getting the simple carb and the protein source within that hour after training can be super beneficial. It can also help us increase our calories if we're struggling to bump our calories up. It can also help us get in that little bit of protein if we're struggling to hit our protein macros. Not to mention, as we get older, we're less able to utilize protein as efficiently. So getting even up to 40 grams of protein right post-workout can help us really optimize the way our body uses it. So it can be increasingly important as we get older that we might dial this in. That being said, if you don't hit your macros for the day, it doesn't matter that you had your post-exercise protein, right? You need to hit those macros for the day. If you have to spread it out differently, if you hit the macros for the day, you're gonna see results. If you hit your calories for the day, you're going to see results. So again, it comes back to those fundamentals. Hit them for the day, you're going to see results. However, if you, again, are trying to optimize a little bit after you have those basics dialed in, using that post-exercise window can be really helpful, especially as we get older to increase our protein intake. The only caveat to this even is if you eat before you train, you're gonna have full glycogen stores, you're gonna get your body what it needs, it's gonna have that to repair after your workout. So you might completely not need to eat after if you are eating right before as well. Again, where we can play with that meal timing. So if you know you're gonna be busy after your training session, eat potentially before. If you usually break your fast after, maybe you adjust your training to break your fast before. Or you just make sure that you do actually break it after to utilize that window, especially as you get older. But again, you can really implement so many different things. It comes back to the fundamentals, calories and macros for the day. I'm gonna keep repeating that because I want you to focus on it. I want you to simplify. That's really the key. I do also wanna make note, if you are a hard gainer and really focus on building muscle, maybe you try and shift a little bit of your timing to get protein right after. If you did a more intense workout or a longer workout where you're more depleted, definitely consider protein and carbs right after. And again, as I mentioned, getting older, you wanna think about even getting up to 40 grams post-workout. If you too also find that you get really, really hungry after your workouts, and then if you have to wait for a meal that backfires and you overeat, think about eating right after you train. But again, there's no one perfect timing, okay? If you eat before, you can negate a lot of these different things anyway, so find the meal timing that works for you. The last myth I wanted to go over was eating after X time will make you gain fat. So there were actually some big diets that came out that would make people stop eating after, I think it was 5 p.m. And the reason they did this was because if you can't eat after a certain time, you're probably going to cut your calories. Just like intermittent fasting can help a lot of people dial in that calorie deficit because it restricts when they can eat so they can't mindlessly snack. If you can't eat after 5 p.m. with a diet, you're going to lose weight. So this myth arose that if you ate after X time of day, all of a sudden you're going to gain fat, which is simply not the case. If you need the calories, if you need the macros, it doesn't matter when you consume them, your body needs them. If you set that calorie intake for the day, if you set those macros for the day and you hit them, you're gonna see results. Because if you're training at 9 p.m. at night and you need to eat after, which you probably do because you have to get enough calories and everything to repair and rebuild, It's okay. You're not going to gain fat from eating at 10 p.m. even. Now, the only thing to note with this is if you weigh at 6 a.m. every single day and you happen to eat 2 or 3 hours later, you might notice that your scale weight actually does increase because you haven't yet eliminated that food. You haven't pooped it out, right? It's still there. You're still digesting it. So you might notice, yes, an increase on the scale from eating later the day before than you usually do. But if you're always eating later, you're going to be weighing at the same time potentially. You won't even notice that. But if you need the calories for the day, consume them. You don't have to stop after X time of day. It's not going to magically turn to fat. I know people even worry, if I eat carbs later at night, will that magically be stored to fat? No. If your body needs the energy, it is going to utilize it. So if you have those carb grams left over in your macros, please consume them because hitting your macro ratios is what's going to help you see results. You do not gain fat just from magically eating later on at that time, okay? So those are 3 meal timing myths I often hear repeated. How are you actually adjusting your meal timing to see results? I'd love to hear about that. But I'd also love to hear how you're now ignoring these things and going back to basics, which are hitting your calories and macros for the day. Because ultimately you can adjust your meal timing to really fit your schedule, your needs, your goals, even as your lifestyle evolves. There is not one perfect meal timing, not one perfect, post-exercise window you have to hit or your muscles melt off. And you can eat at any time of day and still see results. There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like we're working really hard and not seeing the results we deserve. And little inconsistencies can sneak in. It's what I call the "but I was good all week" sort of pattern that we repeat, and the weekend eating sabotaging our results, even though it feels like we're being really consistent. So I wanted to dive into what we actually need to do to assess our inconsistencies and break this pattern and see the results that we deserve. So first things first, why weekly averages matter, okay? I know we're shooting for specific macro ratios a lot of times during the day, and we're shooting for specific calories each and every day, but we can't just caught up in how good was one day. And when I say good, I mean how much were we actually consistent with our ratios and calories. We don't want to assign more value to food, but we want to not only take that daily perspective of hitting the numbers that we want, but we need to watch those weekly averages. Okay? Because consistency is really key. We don't get results from what we do every once in a while. It's very easy when we are making changes too to get wrapped up in how we feel we're doing and ignore some of the inconsistencies that are actually adding up. It's maybe a little thing here, a little thing there. And when you look back at the day in that moment, right, you're like, well, this day was really good. But if you were to look back at that week overall, you'll see all those little times that those little things actually added up to more things, right? 50 calories here, 50 calories there over the week can add up. So what we want to make sure that we do is if you are tracking, you take that step back and even look at that weekly average. You'll be able to see deviations. You can take that bird's eye view of your weekly food logs because you might start to notice that, again, 100 calories here or there or a couple percentages here or there on your macro ratios actually adds up to a bigger deviation on those weekly averages. And if you're repeating the "but I was good all week" and not hitting your macros over the weekend, that's a whole day that you are potentially missing data from that could have really impacted those averages. So we need to really give ourselves that perspective at points and assess not only how did I feel about today, how are my numbers today, but how are my numbers every single day? Because the simple fact of the matter is, one day can really add up, especially when we aren't aware of how our, cheat days, treat days, unlogged days are actually looking. It's very easy to overeat sometimes those more highly processed foods that we tend to be eating when we're not tracking our macros. So one day can really impact a whole week. And this is even the weekend eating pattern that we often sort of see happening, right? We're good for 4 or 5 days and we're thinking, well, 5 out of 7, that's great. But we don't notice how much those 2 or 3 days are really adding up. So it leaves us with, I was good all week and only off on one day. And then we repeat the same pattern, right? We get used to on Friday night letting loose and then we never break that pattern because we do think, well, I'm consistent enough, but then we're frustrated by results, right? It's this whole process and frustration because we're not seeing the progress we want, but we have this feeling that we're being good all week. That's why that step back is so key. Because when you do this, you might notice, hey, I'm trying to create this smaller calorie deficit each and every day so that I can really prevent any muscle loss as I'm losing fat, so that I feel fueled for my workout, so I feel energized, right? Because we don't want that extreme calorie deficit. It can create metabolic adaptations. It can also make us feel low energy and want to fall off, and it can cause even more overeating on the weekend. So if you're trying to create that smaller calorie deficit during the week and only cutting your calories by 100 to 200, it's very easy for that small calorie deficit we've created over the week to be completely blown out over the weekend when we start to add in alcohol, fun meals out, and all those different things. And what we don't realize if we haven't logged it is potentially how much we've actually put ourselves into a surplus for the week over that deficit by even just 1 or 2 days. So it's really key that you do take that step back and assess, what am I actually doing? If you haven't tracked before, try tracking those weekend days. I know it's not fun. You might not be able to be precise, but the more you can sort of see how much am I potentially negating that deficit I'm creating during the week? How much am I actually throwing off my high protein ratio or my low carb ratio or my low fat ratio by how much I'm consuming carbs or fat or a lack of protein over the weekend? When you can start to assess those things, you can even start to dial those things back and create maybe weekend minimums that you hit to keep yourself more consistent. Or maybe you do adjust the way you're dialing in your macros over the week or adjusting your calorie intake to really help yourself see results. But you want to have that data because that data gives you the ability to actually make accurate adjustments and not feel frustrated that you were good all week and not seeing results. We need to track. I know it's not something we like to do. I know it can be hard and tedious, but it really gives us that data. And we can't ignore when we're sort of faced with that weekly average. It doesn't allow the feeling of, I was good today, and today was perfect, and I hit my ratios. It doesn't allow that to color anything. It allows us to really see where were all the small deviations and how do they add up over the week so that we can make accurate changes. Because there's nothing more frustrating than working really hard not to see the results that we deserve. And when we see those inconsistencies, we can make the smallest of small changes that really adds up. So take that step back, assess your weekly averages. Don't get caught up in feeling like you were good all week and compare 5 to 2. Realize how much impact those 2 days can really have so you can make changes that actually build the results you deserve. Let's talk about one of my favorite tweaks to unilateral moves, especially if you don't feel ready, or if you even want to vary things up because you have that instability and you can't go as heavy as you do during bilateral movements. So this amazing hack is the 80-20 variation. So if you are listening to this and you want to see any of the demos of the moves, you can go to YouTube to watch the video. But talking about unilateral exercises, think about that traditional single leg deadlift, right? You know, we might be doing it, feel off balance, so we try and avoid doing them. So you only stick with your bilateral or two-legged deadlift. But then you're missing out on this amazing balance exercise. However, it's key we recognize that doing the single leg deadlift does require a lot of balance and control, and it's not an easy movement. So yes, while we can modify using the hand assist, or we can even, hold on to something with our foot touching the wall, there's a lot of other ways we can get that unilateral benefit without the same challenge, because we have to meet ourselves where we're at. And even if you can use that full unilateral deadlift or single leg deadlift, at points you might be like, well, hey, I want to add loads, or I need to create progression because I can't go up in weight while doing that single leg variation. That's where the 80-20 variation can come into play. Things like using the bench for support, or even I'll show you on the ground, you can use that support to actually take 20% of the weight off or some of the load off while still focusing on that single side as you hinge over. And that way you not only take some of the balance demands out of the movement, but you actually allow yourself to be able to go heavier because of that support. We have to create progression in different ways. And sometimes if you're doing that unilateral work, you want to be able to challenge yourself still, but get the benefits of only focusing on one side to correct any imbalances and make sure both sides are actually pulling their weight. Unilateral moves not only are functionally very important, but they can actually help us increase the loads we're able to lift during bilateral moves. So if you don't have a bench, you can also do a little staggered stance, having only 20% of your weight on this foot, even lifting one toe as you're sort of back by the instep as you do that deadlift. And that way, again, you're taking out some of the balance demands while still getting the unilateral benefit focusing on that one leg. So the 80-20 variation can be a great go-to if you are looking to get in some unilateral work, or even whether or not it's modifying or progressing that unilateral work to be able to also use heavier loads. So while it can make it easier because it's taking away some of the balance and stability demands, you can also make it harder by being able to load it down potentially heavier than you would with the full unilateral variation. Same thing goes for the squat. You can start to stagger that foot back, the ball of the foot by the instep, the heel raised, and you can do that little squat, right? You can control the range of motion sitting back to a bench. You can just go all the way down. You might find that reducing some of the ankle mobility demands actually helps with that unilateral or that stagger stance variation, but it can make it easier than if you're actually trying to do the full single leg squat to a bench and you're building up towards that pistol squat. So remember, there's always a way to tweak a movement to see a new and better result. And if you're really struggling with the full single leg deadlift, if you maybe want to add some loads to progress your unilateral work, consider the 80-20 variation in your workout routine. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Fitness Hacks Podcast. I'd love to hear your biggest takeaways.